What's going on, you guys, and welcome back to the channel. So UFC 300 is right around the corner. Well, it's not really right around the corner. It's in April 2024, but I want to make a predictions videos of what I believe the fight card could possibly be. This is obviously not going to be the fight card. I believe that I could be way off about this, and none of these fights will actually even happen on UFC 300. I believe that this should be all the fights. You have to make UFC 300 a big-time event. It is the 300 pay-per-view for the UFC. You have to go all out for this. I don't care. Put 3 title fights on the card. I don't give a shit. Please, stack it to the fullest. Put big names on there. Put big-time title fights. You have to do it. It is going to be one of the biggest events of the year. And definitely, if you put my fights on there, it's going to easily get over 1 million pay-per-view buys. Easily. Possibly over 1.5. I mean, I got a fully stacked fight card that is realistic. Here's the deal with my fight card. I'm not just putting Conor McGregor, Jon Jones, Leon Edwards, Khamzat, all these people who are big-time names, Nate Diaz, whatever you want to say, on the fight card. These are fights that I feel like just make sense and are realistic to put on this type of fight card. Because you're not going to put Jon Jones and Conor McGregor on the same fight card. That's just insane. But these fights are realistic. And these fights can definitely happen, so let's go ahead and get right into it. We're only going to be talking about the main card. We're not going to get into all of the prelims and the early prelims, just the main card only, okay? So let's go ahead and get right into it. The first fight, Jim Miller versus Nick Diaz. I feel like this right here will be the proper send-off for both of these guys. This could be potentially retirement fights for both of these guys. And it just makes a lot of sense to me. Jim Miller obviously has been on a roll as of recent. I believe he's won his last few fights. Obviously, Nick Diaz hasn't fought since the Robbie Lawler fight a few years ago. But I feel like if this was given to Nick Diaz, I think he will get in good shape or well enough shape to be fighting at UFC 300. Obviously, I know he's going to get a lot older. He's going to be a lot older, but I think that this fight makes a lot of sense. I know that Dana White has said that he wants to have Nick fight again, and maybe this can be the retirement fight for Nick Diaz and possibly Jim Miller as well. I believe that Jim Miller's been considering retirement. He doesn't know whether or not if he does fight at UFC 300, that will be his last fight. But hey, if it's the last fight, let's have it against Nick Diaz. 2 legends of the sport who've been fighting for such a long time. Have both of those guys go out there and put on a show and start the fight card off, you know, with this type of fight. I feel like this is a great fight for both of these guys. And, yeah, just to set off the fight card, I think they should go with Jim Miller versus Nick Diaz as the first fight of the night. The next fight is a little crazy, okay? This one, to me, is the most unrealistic fight. I don't think that this fight would happen. But to me, if both guys win, this is also, by the way, kind of going off if a certain type of fighter wins and stuff like that. So, yeah. So, obviously, you know, if, let's say, this fighter loses, then this can all get fucked up, right? Alexander Volkanovski versus Michael Chandler at 155. Hear me out. Obviously, I think Volk will have to win this fight against Ilia Topuria whenever that fight happens. And then you also have to have Michael Chandler win his fight against Conor McGregor, which I believe he will win. I believe both of those guys will both win their fights. And I think that fight makes a whole lot of sense. It really does. I don't think Volk is going to get that title fight immediately. Volk is going to have to work his way back up. And by the way, sorry for the person who's cutting the grass. My apologies. As I was saying, I don't think he's going to get the title fight immediately against Islam Makhachev. I think Justin Gaethje probably early on, maybe in February or something like that, just like how Volk got it last time. Justin Gaethje is going to fight Islam Makhachev probably in February. And that's not going to give Islam enough time to rest for, you know, if he does win against Justin, or Justin to rest, you know, to have plenty. There's not enough time for them to be ready for UFC 300. You know what I mean? So, obviously, you got to go with something else. Volkanovski, obviously, being on this card is big time for them. Volk being reintroduced into the lightweight division and fighting one of the top contenders in the division, Michael Chandler, one of the most entertaining guys in the whole division and all of the UFC. I think that fight makes perfect sense. I think that fight is fantastic, and I think that fight makes to me, it makes a whole lot of sense, in my honest opinion. If, you know, Volk is completely done with the division. I mean, he's fought everybody in the division at 145. There's nobody, like, bro, Max Holloway is not getting the title fight. Get the fuck out of here. He will get the vacant title shot, but he's not going to fight Volk again. I highly doubt it. They're not going to do Volk versus Max 4. Volk beat him every single time. He is 3-0 against Max Holloway. Why are we doing this a fourth time? It makes no sense. You know what I mean? So don't even think about Max versus Volk 4. Forget about that. It is all about what Volk wants to do and possibly go up a division once again and fight a top contender and get in the mix for a title shot. Maybe in the future, if he does beat a Michael Chandler, he can fight Dustin Poirier, or he can fight another top contender, or maybe a possible Charles Oliveira. Maybe he could do Charles Oliveira versus Volk. I think that will be a great fight. Depending on where Charles will be after his fight against Islam Makhachev, if Oliveira does win against Makhachev, but I believe that Islam is going to win again. But who knows? Anything can happen in the sport. But anyway, I believe that this fight makes a whole lot of sense, though. I think they will be open to do this fight, and I think there will be plenty of time for both guys to rest and stuff like that. You know, if if Chandler fights in December, I think he'll be ready for April for UFC 300 to fight Volkanovski or whoever. You know what I mean? I feel like you got to get Michael Chandler at UFC 300. I mean, it's fireworks whenever Michael Chandler fights. And he will probably be a big-time name coming out of UFC in the December fight card pay-per-view. He will be even a bigger name than what he is now. And then him fighting a guy like Volk, that will be big time. So, yes, second fight of the night, Volk versus Michael Chandler. Book it. I don't give a shit. Obviously, a little unrealistic, but fuck it. Let's throw it at a wall and see if it sticks. Next fight, everything else from here on out are title fights. Brandon Moreno versus Pantoja, the trilogy. I believe this is their third fight, right? The trilogy fight between both of these guys. I feel like this will be a perfect slot for the first title fight of the night. It's obviously the flyweight championship. It's not like obviously every championship is prestigious, but I don't think that anybody will mind them going third, you know what I mean? Obviously, they could possibly be a co-main event, but the other two fights are not going to go over them. Pantoja and Moreno, obviously Pantoja's not that big of a name, even still after his win. And now obviously you got Moreno, who is a bigger name. And I think this fight still makes a lot of sense. I think that was an extremely close fight. And that's why I feel like they're going to remake that fight. And they can do that fight for UFC 300. And that can be one of the 3 title fights. It makes perfect sense to me. Because I don't want nobody else to fight Pantoja, really. I don't really care for anybody else in the flyweight division. Call me a casual. I really don't care. But I really do want to see this fight once again. Because it was a great fight last time that they fought. And there's plenty of time for them to rest and stuff like that. I mean, they literally just fought a few months ago. And they will have to wait until April. Maybe they probably fight a little earlier, a little sooner. If they do decide to do that fight a little bit earlier, maybe in February or maybe in March. But April makes a lot of sense for those two guys to fight, in my honest opinion. I think if they were given the opportunity to fight at UFC 300, they will be glad to fight at UFC 300. So make the fight happen between Moreno and Alexandre Pantoja. I think that fight makes a whole lot of sense, and I think it will be a great fight. Fight to start off all the title fights. Let's get into the co-main events. Now, this is where it's a little interesting, because this could obviously main events 100%. But these two guys are not like insanely big names to the point where they can main event UFC 300, I believe. You know what I mean? They're big names, and especially to the people who watch the UFC and the MMA, people know who these guys are, but I don't think they're like huge names in order for them to be at the top of the bill. It's going to be Tom Aspinall versus Sergey Pavlovich for the vacant heavyweight championship of the world. I believe that Jon Jones is going to retire after Stipe. And with that being said, you got to get a new heavyweight title fight. I think this fight makes so much sense, and I think it's the best possible fight that you can do at heavyweight besides anything else with Jon Jones. You know what I mean? I think Sergey Pavlovich versus Tom Aspinall is such an intriguing fight. I like both guys. I think both guys are super entertaining. They're really good fighters. I think they're the two best fighters besides Jon Jones in the heavyweight division, in my honest opinion. And I think that fight will be a damn good co-main event. I mean, think about that. The heavyweight championship is in the co-main events. Think about that for a second. How insane that is. That is absolutely just nuts to me. I think Pavlovich wants to wait for the title shot, and obviously Aspinall, if he was given the opportunity to fight for the championship, he's obviously going to take it. So I think that is a co-main event. It's absolutely spectacular, and I believe that fight would not even. I don't even think it's going to go more than 2 rounds. To be honest with you, I think that one of those guys are going to get a finish. Whoever that will be, we don't know, but that fight intrigued me so much, and for that to be the co-main event of UFC 300, I think that is fantastic. I think that, obviously usually it's kind of weird for a main event, like a heavyweight championship fight to go in the co-main and not the main. But to me, with those guys not being like big time names, obviously I know that Aspinall has kind of like, his following in the UK and whatever. And then you got Pavlovich, who was kind of growing in popularity a little bit. I don't even think there's still like huge names to main event a UFC 300. We're talking about UFC 300 here, ladies and gentlemen. You know what I mean? We're not talking, listen, they're big names. They're not big enough, to me, they're not big enough names to be the main event of this fight, of this pay-per-view, in my honest opinion. So I will have them in the co-main event. It's going to be fireworks. It's going to be fantastic to watch. Aspinall versus Pavlovich, great stuff. Now the main events, Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira 3, the trilogy. We'll see what happens with Pereira if he gets a possible title shot at 205. If he can challenge, Yuri Prochazka, which could possibly happen. He might lose that fight. I can definitely see Pereira lose that fight. But I wouldn't mind if he goes back down to challenge once again Izzy for the middleweight strap. And I think that fight obviously it makes a lot of sense. This is one of the best rivalries today in all of the UFC. You know what I mean? And I think Izzy especially will be down to get a big-time payday. I think that he will get paid a shitload of money to do this fight. Because obviously I believe that Izzy will want a lot more money to fight Alex Pereira once again, right? And I think, obviously this fight sells for itself. The last fight, what happened between the two of them, with Izzy getting a knockout, and then the fight before, Alex Pereira knocking out Izzy. You know what I mean? I think this fight makes so much sense. It's one of the best rivalries going today in the UFC, and I think it will be perfect to main event UFC 300. It's beautiful. You got Izzy, who is one of the biggest names in the sport, and then also Alex Pereira, who is another huge name, and it's the biggest rivalry in the sport today, in my honest opinion. And I think that with that main event, you got a whole fight card of insane fights. The main card is absolutely insane. Don't overcharge us, UFC, just because of this fight card being crazy. Give us the regular amount that you've always been giving us. Because, y'all always like to overcharge us and shit. Keep it the same amount, and trust me, you're going to get a lot of pay-per-view buys from this fight card. The fight card that I just named, that I just went through, just imagine, bro, you are going to get easily over 1.5 million pay-per-view buys. They look at 3 big-time title fights, a heavyweight championship, vacant championship match. You got Izzy and Alex Pereira in the main event. Volk making his reintroduction to the 155-pound division. You got Nick Diaz versus Jim Miller, 2 legends in the sport. And then, and then you got the flyweight strap between Pantoja and Moreno, who have a history. Bro, how do you not get over 1 million pay-per-view buys? This definitely does 1 million pay-per-view buys. And I'm telling you, you got to go all out for this pay-per-view. It's UFC 300. 300 pay-per-views of the UFC. You got to go crazy for that. You got to stack it up. You got to put everybody on the fight card. So do it for UFC 300. And in my honest opinion, I think this is a great fight card, obviously. And then you can also build, the prelims and the early prelims and put some interesting fights there. Sprinkle a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and you got a perfect fight card. One of the best probably the best fight card of the whole year right there. But that's pretty much it, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what you guys think about the fight card. Do you guys like it? Do you guys not? And yeah, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys soon with another video. Peace.